Yeah, we know, Mr. Buckley.
Yeah. You were saying, Mr. Miller.
Well, I wanted to get back on some of the points that we bypassed while we were talking quickly. One of them is my feelings about Castro.
Yeah.
To begin with, one of the reasons why the rate of people, not the absolute number, but the rate of people who left Cuba have been greater than those who left Nazi Germany, which I take from you as being factual. It may not be. But if it is, there are a number of reasons for it. One of them is that Castro let them out. He did not keep them from going out. He allowed them to leave. He didn't always allow them to leave, but there was a period where he let them
leave. Well, that's historically inaccurate. Hitler allowed anybody to leave, but he wouldn't allow people to leave with their property. Castro has not allowed anybody to leave with his property and has been extremely erratic in the flow of people that he allows out. For instance, he makes them go to Madrid, which means that anybody who leaves has to be capitalized to the tune of about $800 for a ticket to Madrid on over to North America, which is a form of torture that I don't think you particularly admire.
It's not agreeable. No, I would not admire that. And in fact, if I were ever to talk to him, I would talk to him and say, why do you do that?
Out, yeah.
I wouldn't say cut it out. I'd say, why do you do that?
Yeah. What would he say?
I'd be interested in his reply. It might be different than yours.
I hope so.
But at any rate, the reason I admire him is because the man has a heroic quality, because I believe that Cuba under Batista was far worse than it is today. I think it was an ugly, obscene, disgusting place. I think today, I have a hunch that there are any number of aspects of Cuba that I would detest. I think there'd probably be a fanaticism and a militancy that I wouldn't like.
This is very fashionable. I hear this said very, very often, and I think it is thoughtlessly said. For instance, I hope you remember that National Review loathed Batista. But under Batista, at his worst, there were certain things that you could do. For instance, you could found an opposition newspaper. For instance, you could publish your book. For instance, you could join a labor union. For instance, you could strike. For instance, you could travel in and out of the country. For instance, you could practice your religion freely. Now, it seems to me that here is a list of 6 things which, even up against the personal vulgarity of Batista, made life in Cuba a hell of a lot preferable under him than under his successor.
Well, it certainly did for the middle classes in Cuba. Up to
poor people, too. Poor people read books.
Well, no, but there was a very low literacy rate in Cuba. Castro's improved the literacy rate enormously.
Well, enormously, yeah.
Well, I don't have the figures, so I won't say enormously. He certainly has improved it. You won't pretend he hasn't improved
No, I don't pretend that. But for you to say that, after all, poor people don't really need freedom, whether economic or political.
I'm saying the opposite of that.
You're saying that in effect. You say, well, these are middle-class values.
The poor people...
What about joining a labor union? You're supposed to be for that, aren't you?
No, well, that's one point at a time. The poor people never had any freedom under Batista. They had the freedom to starve in one place. They had the freedom to be beaten half to death by the local police.
That isn't true, you know. I gather you think it's true, because I'm sure you wouldn't say it otherwise. But in point of fact, it isn't true, you know. The only people who were beaten up by the Batista police were people who wanted to replace him. He was a despot. I don't deny this. But I'm simply saying that since... most people do not want to replace the government. And since, in point of fact, it was the middle class who led the movement against Batista, not the lower class, in point of fact, therefore, the lower class enjoyed a great many freedoms which were tangible things to them, which they're not nowadays allowed to enjoy. And for you to goblinize the whole era of the 50s, as a period during which the poor people just simply had half a banana a day and spent the rest of the time in prison, it's just plain inaccurate. It's melodrama of the kind that makes it much easier for you to justify, again, the Mailer expiation. You're having subscribed to a committee which was bankrolled by Castro himself, it turns out, called the Fair Play for Castro Committee. It's these myopias of yours that make you less than a reliable witness. You're a wonderful writer, but a terrible witness.